Yo, I'm so excited. If this is your first time stopping by, this is my YouTube space. My name is Kacha, as always. I said that really weird. Kacha. I read this book that I'm going to be reviewing I think I started reading it last year, and yeah, it's been a while. It's May 2020. It's the last day of May, and I'm just like, girl. But I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited I got my natural hair out. You know, like, I'm still trying to get used to like seeing my face with my natural hair. Isn't that crazy? I'm like, still, this is different. This is new for me. Giving you Afro-Brazilian vibes. This earrings I got from Brazil on the beach. I barely ever wear them because I just feel like it doesn't, I don't know, it's like this vibe that I'm not sure if that's me. Anyway, enough talk about that. I'm here to do a book review on Akala's Natives. If you are sort of about that life and in the scene of knowing about like racial history, and there's this scene of people, you know what I'm saying? There's like a, you know, you might have come across Akala, or if you just like hip-hop anyway, you might have come across Akala, because I think he's an artist. My first introduction to him actually was when I was in uni. He came to our uni. Shout out to my friend Credia. She was like, oh, there's this guy that's coming around, he's coming to our uni to do like a talk. Basically, we went to this thing, right? And it was really good. It was really good. Like, he's so intelligible. He's like just so he knows a lot about how the world has come, especially around black and white racial stuff. I don't have the words for it, but he basically knows, he be knowing. And yeah, he knows a lot about race, and he talks a lot about race, and he's not shy. He doesn't shy away from the topic, as I believe that no one should, because it's a massive issue in this current climate, okay? But I think this is such a good book as well, like even to read now with everything that's going on, especially with the death of George Floyd, and all of the stuff that's happening around that, and how obviously America being this country where everyone is just like, okay, like they're killing black people, whereas in the UK, you know, we're pretty much quite a lot of European countries are built on the backs, the sweat and the blood of a lot of Africans, unwillingly and willingly. So yeah, it's just quite interesting because it talks about that and how Britain likes to pretend and that it doesn't have the history that it does. Not just history as well. It's always annoying calling it history, because it's like, it almost feels like it's something from like the pre-medieval times, but this is like in the last 200 years and up to this very present day. So he talks about all of that in this book, and I'm going to get into it. I feel like I say this about every single book, but this is a book that I really especially like want to go back to and read, like maybe a chapter, like when I find out an issue on something, I just want to go back and be like, okay, what did Akala have to say about that? Yeah, so I'm just going to read through the table of contents very briefly, just to give you a snapshot of what the book actually talks about. The first thing is, obviously after the dedication and stuff, is born in the 1980s. That's when he was born. The day I realized my mom was white. He's biracial. His dad is black, his mom is white. Special needs with a question mark, and talking about how basically in the UK, how his intelligence was almost sort of being pulled off as him being special needs, whereas he was just a smart black kid. But obviously that's not something that they associate black kids with, so they try to put him into like a special needs category. Quite interesting. Linford's Lunchbox. It's about this man who, I think he was an athlete. See, this is such a long time I read this book and I can't remember, but I think he was an athlete, and even in the prime of his career, instead of talking about his achievements, the one things that people wanted to talk about was the size of his thingy downstairs. So that was quite interesting. It talks about empire and slavery in the British memory. I'm gonna get to that one. Very interesting. It talks about Scotland and Jamaica, because he's Scottish and Jamaican, British born. Very interesting. He talks about police, peers and teenage years, stop and search in the UK. because when we talk about police brutality, I only think of like the US. I rarely ever think of like this is happening to people in the UK, right? We try and pretend things like these don't really happen in this country, but this book actually claims that it does, and it's actually got numbers. The amount of times that you actually get stopped and searched in the UK as a black man is shocking in comparison to other races. This is such an interesting chapter, right? So this is the title. It says, why do white people love Mandela? Why do conservatives hate Castro, like Fidel Castro? I think this is something that has been sort of like in conversations, right, about the approach of Mandela towards like the apartheid in South Africa, and in the end I think he was a lot more peaceful, should I say, in his approach, rather than some other people would have liked him to be, right? Let's put it that way. Yeah, anyway, and then it's interesting that people like Fidel, I still have a lot to learn about Fidel Castro. Like, I'm not even going to pretend that I know what he was about or his legacy or anything. I have a lot to learn. But I know that people obviously don't really like Fidel in his approach. And they talked about why people hated him and they liked Mandela, whereas the things that they were fighting for, I guess, was sort of the same, can you say? So that was such an interesting one. And I learned in this chapter that actually Fidel and Cuba was quite monumental in like the fight against apartheid government in South Africa. I didn't know that. That was quite interesting. He talks about the KKK. I hope this video doesn't get put off of YouTube because I mentioned that word, but this is just the name of the book in the chapter. The name of the chapter in the book. The name of the thing just says, it's a statement. It says, the KKK stopped crime by killing black people. That's the chapter of this book, and obviously addressing the ridiculousness basically of that statement, right? And he talks about Britain and America, also quite interesting, comparing cultures of black people in Britain and America. There's fights, the struggle, black British culture, what does that even mean? Does it exist? Did we make it up in our heads? He talks about the decline of whiteness, the decline of race as a question mark. What does the future actually look like for race, and yeah, for race basically just going forward. Yeah, so now I'm going to talk about some of the things that I really liked that he mentioned in the book. So the first one, I think he made such a good analogy or analysis of race, and how slavery obviously did not originate from black people. There's been slaves for time, okay? Obviously everyone knows that, but then for some reason, like, I guess black people are the ones who have the biggest stain of slavery, and just basically explaining how the transatlantic, I can't say that word, the transatlantic slave trade, how it really changed the perception of black people, and how that didn't actually start from when that slave trade started. It happened somewhere in the middle. And I also didn't know that the word slave actually originates from the word Slav, because so many Slavic people were enslaved. And so it's interesting, he goes into why obviously the idea of slave now makes people uncomfortable, because it's sort of like almost associated with blackness, whereas the word Slav actually comes from Slav, which is not black. Okay, so he also debunks the theory that Africans sold their own people, and basically how slave apologists try to twist that narrative. As a Nigerian myself, I'm just going to say that I have been one of those people who have been like on the side of just holding Africans responsible for what they allowed, happened to Africans in terms of slavery. But then I completely missed the entire point where it wasn't like an allowance thing. It's a lot more bigger than, oh, you know, that's the lies that they're trying to portray when it comes to slavery, that, you know, the Europeans just came around, you know, they were looking to do some trade and people wanted to sell their people. Lies. I mean, so it was just debunking that theory. And I know that quite a lot of Nigerians have this opinion. When you live in Nigeria, all you see is black, right? So the notion of race is not even, it's not the same, right? And I have a whole video that I really wanted to do on that because I have a personal experience of it. But basically, because the people that we see, the enemies that we see, are our own skin color. So when we want to hold people accountable, that's what we hold accountable. The book goes into all the details that you need, and it did a fantastic way of explaining that. I think it really educated me to stop, you know, following this theory of people, you know, that people say that all black people sold their, you know, their friends, they sold their family. Like, we weren't like brothers and sisters sitting around the fire doing kumbaya. Like, there were tribes and different people, different conflicts and so much stuff. So yeah, this really goes into that, which I think is quite fantastic. There's so much research that went into this book. Like, he has like a whole theory, a whole chapter, sorry, of references. I don't know why I keep doing this, like, who am I trying to kill? So he had a whole chapter of references, and it's so well researched. Like, even for myself being Igbo, like the fact that he even mentioned Igbo and Biafra in this book, I was just like, come on bro, come on. Like, he done his research, he did such an amazing job. And then I also learned about so many people that history doesn't really teach us about. Like, so many people, like for example this dude called Toussaint I don't know how you say his name, but I'm going to put it on the screen. And just so many highlighting the efforts of so many black like abolitionists and people who were fighting for black freedom more than the whitewashed history that they're trying to give us of like, you know, oh, like Britain stopped slave trade, which is just completely just it's just ridiculous. And that was one thing that he really went into as well, like the notion that the British government for some reason on their own accord randomly decided that, oh, you know, we're just gonna stop slave trade now. Lies. You actually get an education on the impact that slave revolution actually paid in the like to actually get slave trade abolished. It wasn't because people thought, oh yeah, we're now good people, so let's now, you know, it really took a long time. I was like, hell, well, I didn't know nothing. Like it was I can't even get my words together. But yes, it was such a massive learning. And even today, like, and yesterday, like, still learning about how the money that they had to pay out to slave traders was only repaid in 2015. So you can imagine, like, it's just crazy, really, the fact that people up until 2015 were still, like, taxpayers especially, were still paying for slave trade in some type of way up until 2015. So it's crazy. I think they said that the figure is actually like 40% of the national budget in the year when slave trade got abolished was what was used to pay out slave traders. So history can literally just be turned upside down just to make you believe what people want you to believe. So gotta stay woke. I'm also actually really happy that he mentioned the poppy. If you don't know, poppy is something, it's like a flower that British people wear in remembrance of like the World War, and he mentioned that about how year after year we have remembrance of the World War, which is a good thing. And then, but when you talk about slavery, people are like, oh, it's history, you should just forget it. Crazy really, but it's quite interesting. I think he also talked about the notion of just blackness in general and race, and how race obviously is a social construct. It was just made up. It's complicated because he's biracial, right? And he has dreads. And he talked about how when he went to Brazil, he was filming a video, I think, and he got stopped by the police. And if God didn't save him and he opened his mouth and then they realized that, oh, he's actually not Brazilian, then he could have got arrested, or potentially worse things could have happened to him, as you know, can happen. Because in Brazil, he looks like a black man, you know, dreads. Black Brazilians these days, they're not, you would see quite a lot of light-skinned black Brazilians, basically is what I'm trying to say. Obviously there are a lot of dark-skinned ones, but there's been quite a lot of interracial relationships, so quite a lot of people are mixed. You have a lot of mixed black people. So yeah, he was just racially profiled as a black man. Whereas when he goes to Jamaica, people are like, oh yeah, like he's got the good skin, because he's like light skin and all this stuff, and he's more associated to whiteness when he goes to Jamaica, whereas in another country it's totally different. Okay, and then he also talked about what I was actually trying to allude to is the fact that when he was talking about a friend of his who speaks to like black young men in the UK. And he was talking about how when he went to a school and asked them to, whilst he was obviously teaching them, asked them to sort of think of like a black man, like a UK black man, think of what notions that they will come up with in relation to this person being black. And they had a lot of negative things to say. This was black people themselves had a lot of negative things to say about a black young boy in the UK, whereas they then asked them to think of like a black Yoruba. Like a Yoruba is a tribe in Nigeria, so it's like, think of a Yoruba boy or like a Yoruba man. What sorts of like ideas of what values do you think they have? What do you think they like? And they had a lot of positive things to say, apart from the fact that they're demons, probably. I'm kidding. There was also the whole idea of, I think it was in the Britain versus America chapter, talking about how Africans, and I think I mentioned this earlier in the video, how Africans will most likely tend to hold their leaders accountable when they're looking at like the problem of blackness and Africans, and we tend to forget the sort of things that have happened, you know, colonization, that whole thing. There's so much that has happened, and we didn't just find ourselves here, you know. There's so much that has happened to us and that has been done to us and that has been taken away from us that makes it difficult for us to just get up and move on. Yeah, and so that he also explored a little bit in the book as well. So thank you so much, Akala, for giving us this gem. And thank you so much for watching this YouTube video.